We're going to have a discussion on global cannabis industry horizons. And to lead this panel is one of my favorite people on the planet. Originally got into the cannabis industry with Bang Chocolate, and now the Holland Group? The New Holland Group, the CEO of the New Holland Group, one of the best people on the planet. She's going to lead it right now. Let's hear it for Jamie Pearson. Yeah, you go as a team. Yeah.
Perfect. David next to George, Will, and Raj.
Keep it close to you.
Yeah, I want Raj first. Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Wait. Are you awake? Okay, do me a favor. Everyone, give me a big wave. I want to see hands in the air. Okay, do I have your attention? Okay, good. You're awake. You guys all got your mics? You're mic'd up? All right. I'm so excited to be here because look at my panel. Can you believe that panel? It's amazing. Okay, I'm Jamie Pearson, as Ungayo told you. I ran a chocolate company called Bang for 7 years. We went cross borders, so we were the 7 U.S. states. We did an 11-state deal with Trulieve out of Florida. We're the #1 chocolate in Canada. We brought our brand through 4 distribution agreements into 9 European countries. 3 years ago, I left and started a consulting firm, and we help brands cross borders and countries cross borders from Europe to the U.S. and U.S. to Europe. I'm going to start and let my panel introduce themselves, starting with Margaret all the way to the left. And when we're done introducing, we're going to dive right in. What I would like you to do as an audience is silent your phones. And I would also like you to think about what you want to know from this panel, because I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions.
Thank you. I'm Margaret Brody. I'm here from Vancouver, Canada, the home of BC Bud. With Rubicon Organics, we are Canada's premium leader. Our brands you may have heard of: Simply Bare Organic, 1964, Wildflower are our 3 flagship brands. Very proud to represent. We care about quality, putting the consumer first, and we're looking to build trusted brands for the future, to be on shelf for 30 years. And very excited to be here with actually a panel of people that I really respect tremendously. Oh, and come visit our booth if you see it. 379, we're there to chat.
Well done, Margaret. David Hyde, CEO of Hyde Advisory and Investments. We're really focused on M&A and investments in the cannabis space. We've facilitated around 10 to 12 transactions a year for the last several years, and a big swing towards Europe. So we'll talk more about that, Jamie, in a few minutes.
I'm George Bello, co-founder of Somai Pharmaceutical. We're one of the largest privately multi-country operators. We're located in 12 countries now. We plan to be in 20, which we'll discuss a little bit later. And I'm very pleased to be here on this panel.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you, Jamie. And thank you to Alex and the ICBC group for having us here. My name is Will Muki. I'm the CIO and co-founder of Artemis Growth Partners. Artemis is an investment fund. We invest solely in cannabis. We manage about $400 million US in AUM across 32 companies and 90 plus positions. We've been in the European space really since 2018 with an investment in a Danish company called Valcon Medical. Prior to that, we have been North American focused, Caribbean, South America, Israel, and at one point in time, even China. That's gone.
Hello, everyone. Hello, fellow panelists. Hi, Jamie. My name is Raj Grover. I'm the founder, president, and CEO of High Tide. High Tide trades on the NASDAQ, Toronto, and the Frankfurt Stock Exchanges. Through our Canna Cabana brand, we are the largest Canadian retailer with 196 locations and growing. And we also own 3 of the top-tier consumption accessory brands in the US, 2 of the top-tier CBD brands in the US, and 1 in the UK. And looking forward to getting into the German market.
You heard it here. Look at that panel. We have biggest retail, biggest investor, biggest manufacturer, biggest M&A guy, and the queen of quality. Look at that.
The best moderator in the house.
And the best moderator, of course. Okay, so we agreed back in the green room that we're going to start with George. George has recently announced through a press release that he's looking at expanding his business. So George, as you're rapidly expanding your footprint and you announced that you were aiming to reach 20 countries through with your multi-country operator strategy, could you share the strategic considerations that are involved in scaling an operation like that across so many diverse international markets?
Sure. So just to start out with, those of you that were yesterday at the Tellman Group, we had DJ Muggs there and Alex. They were talking. Woo! Yeah, Jamie, obviously. So they were talking about a very interesting thing, and the discussion started out regarding regulatory changes and things that you think, you become complacent, I should say, at some point, thinking that things are going to kind of stay or move, and they keep changing. So from SOMAI's perspective, one of the key things for us is diversification of risk. So that's why we're in 12 countries. That's why we're expanding to 20 countries. It's very important for us to make sure that we diversify and we see all the different potential countries as they grow. Some dip, some go up, some are new. So for us, that's one of the key important things, especially with we have over 135 SKUs, so we can bring any more or less product to the market. The issues you have with that is it runs into, and again, Will also touched on this at the Tellman Group yesterday, was working capital. So one of the key things that we see today, as we see, let's say, Germany expanding, we see the markets growing significantly, and we see that you don't need to put money anymore into the CapEx aspect of the business, but you do need that money for expansion, and you do need the money for working capital. And today, I think the opportunity from an investor point of view actually is looking towards that because you're already de-risked. We've invested $30 million into our facility. We've done that. We're investing into our own distribution in Australia. We're investing into UK. We're investing into Germany. But now, for us to scale, like we announced that, we got $4.5 million in working capital. We need more because we can grow. So that's, I think, if we're discussing from an investment, let's say, kind of industry horizon, this is where I think, at least from a risk point of view, where you can move forward.
What I see from my perspective when I'm helping companies like yours raise money, the companies are always looking at it through the lens of we need more because we know what we're trying to do. But the investor only cares about one thing, and it's how much money am I going to make if I give you my money, right? And what you're saying for the investors out in the crowd, what I heard him say is, if you have the fundamentals of your infrastructure built, if you have taken steps to de-risk your investment by expanding across multiple countries, so to Muggs's point, you go here and you think it's going to be this rule, and then the country changes the rule, and now you got to pivot, and now you go here and you got to change the rule, and we've seen this, and Charlie Bachtel talked about it this morning, about how there's a predictable cycle of what happens in these markets, and we're in the cycle in Germany. I think we'll all argue. I say we're starting the price compression, and they're all saying no, we're not even there yet. But what we know comes on the end is brands and quality. We're way not there yet. So when you're looking to invest your dollars, you want to find investments like SOMAI that have been de-risked because you've got a thoughtful operator who is not chasing the something shiny syndrome, right? Oh, there's something good over there. Let me do that. No, stick to your fundamentals. And that brings me to David Hyde. Speaking of fundamentals, you recently facilitated a strategic investment that turned from one thing to another. I'd like you to talk about that to the degree that you can.
Yeah, sure, Jamie, thanks. And at the Tolman House group yesterday, we talked at a great discussion yesterday, and I talked about the rise of the strategic investor, the global strategic investor. And certainly in our business, we've seen that come to fruition quite a lot. So a couple of deals in Germany we're closing right now, one that'll be announced next week. And really what we're seeing is focus on companies, the investors are looking for companies a little bit more sophisticated now, of course, the investors, 2.0, if you will.
Is that because everyone lost all their money in
I
Canada
think
the
they
first
learned,
go-round?
yeah, they learned a lot of
They
lessons.
know what it looks like?
Not all their money, I might add. There's some good companies out there.
Well,
You're
all
right.
the investors except the ones that invested with Margaret lost
And
all their
Raj.
money. And Raj,
There's
exactly.
a couple of
We're
rare
covered
end to
end.
exceptions, but
the
yes.
two profitable companies in Canada right now, right? Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
go
look,
ahead.
what the investor's looking for now is kind of get through the mist, right? So both of the deals we're closing right now, they did things right. They've got a very, the data room's full and complete. They're ready for a transaction, right? It's not pulled together last minute, done on the side of the plate with 5 other things. They put the resources and time into saying, yeah, we need the investment, we need the M&A, we're going to dedicate ourselves to really positioning for it. And then when you get down to brass tacks, there's flexibility. So many of these deals fail because one side gets intransigent and is not prepared to move. And in this market, you've got to be flexible on both sides. The best deals, not everyone's happy about it, but you end up somewhere in the middle. So what I saw with these successful transactions was that the seller was prepared, or the investee was prepared. Data room was really tight. They had revenue going and an on-ramp to revenue growth. And in the strategic investment area, Jamie, they had things that the investor wanted. And when you think about, I'll end on this, when you're looking at a German or a European company, people want market access, want market expansion, want market share. So to the extent that you can provide them that, it might not be it's not just a financial investment. They're actually investing in, they see their products coming through your facility, or they see themselves manifesting through the investment, and that's a really important consideration for folks that are looking at these transactions.
Yeah, they obviously had something to offer because it started off as a minority play, and then when they saw how strong the fundamentals were, they were like, wait a minute, we're going to be strategic here, invest some money in this company, and then you sort of control your own destiny a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Margaret, that brings me to you. The thing I find cool about you is I saw an interview you gave on the Dales report, and I was watching and thinking about how do you exceed your expectations, because you've consistently exceeded the expectations of investors. And I want to know, when I think about Canadian investment opportunities, the world's kind of cooled to that a little bit, except for the good operators. How have you been able to maintain a good operation? How have you kept your eyes on the prize? And what advice would you give to the investors out there who are looking at placing investments even in maybe Canada?
Look, I think we need to remember, firstly, our share price isn't where it was, so I think there are some investors that are very unhappy with us, and that's fair, and my share price, my personal share price, sits at a higher amount than that, but I am working very hard every day to get us back there. And I believe that when I came into the CEO role, it's an opportunity to make sure that you deliver on what you say you're going to do. So any companies out there, do not be overly promotional, be clear, be transparent, and do what you say you're going to do. We had an extremely tough market in Canada in the last 3 years. It's been unbelievably challenging with price compression. I think a number of the markets think they're in price compression. You haven't seen it yet. We have lived it. Raj is nodding his head. What we saw was companies going out of business and selling their product at any cost. That crushes every segment of the market, because when people are walking into the store saying, I want the highest THC for the lowest price, it brings the whole market down and people are just selling out their vaults. We're through that now. So as you're going to build your business, focus where you can win, play where you can win. We want to build and look to have our brands on shelf for 30 years, as I said. We're very focused on executing. We announce when we know we're locked and loaded on something, we announce. We don't announce pie in the sky plans. Then we want to go out. We're going to hold ourselves to a high standard. I had a wonderful, wonderful father who held me to a high standard, and he used to say, what happened to the other 2% on a test? It wasn't always 98%, let's be real. Sometimes it was, what was the other 21% on the test? But I was a competitive athlete. We often get told, oh, you guys, your team is very friendly and you love what you do and you're very enthusiastic. We are, but we also want to win, and one of our values is competitive spirit. And I think you want to have operators that want to get better all the time. If you're an investor, look at teams with track records, with credibility. If you're a company and if you're in this industry, don't overpromise. Deliver on what you say you're going to do. And if you make a mistake, own it, move around it, get ahead of it. One last thing I would say is, so many things go wrong in cannabis all the time. And if you're not prepared to have that happen and don't have the resilience, I'm so blessed to have a team that, A, we work together, we challenge each other, we want respectful, healthy, challenging dialogue, and we want the right answer and the best answer. It doesn't need to be mine. And we own what goes right and what goes wrong. And with investors and with everyone, and with customer too. So remember, your customer is your most important part of this whole thing.
You got to deliver to the customer all the time. And I think that is what you were talking about yesterday at the Tallman event, about how we're all talking in Germany in terms of tonnage. Oh, this company's moving that many tons. This company's moving that many tons. But what is your company talking about?
We're focused on quality. Every conversation, quality is one of our core values. If you come to a meeting at our company, quality is brought up in every single meeting. It is absolutely core. We're here to elevate consumer experiences. We're here to build trust with them. I say all the time to our team, somebody takes their hard-earned dollars, they go at the end of a long week and they go to take our products, to try our products. Let's make that consumption experience amazing. Let's make them feel good. Let's help them. Let's be proud of that. You know, you don't have to consume to work for us, but deliver a quality, wonderful experience to people.
And your focus on quality.
Yeah.
Is essentially skating to where the puck is going, because sorry.
No, that's okay. We like hockey in Canada. I got told I said hockey. We're very proud Canadians and support hockey very strong. But look, we see that the entire world industry is going to move towards three things. It's going to be about quality, it's going to be about genetic, and it's going to be about brand. And that's going to be built through the quality promise. Those are the three things we focus on. We're in an extremely competitive environment in Canada. All of these markets will get there, and your consumer cares about quality as they move along. So focus, focus, focus. We stand for quality. We make decisions to reduce, to not put a sale through if the quality is not there and it's not consistent. We do not ever want to damage the brand reputation.
And that's the lane you've chosen to stay in. But Raj, you've picked a different lane. And not that you're not picking quality, but what you have done is picked loyalty. I've watched what you've been doing. The largest retailer on the planet in cannabis, 190? Federally legal, yes. Federally legal, 190 stores, a lot of stores. You're 196 stores, sorry, excuse me. And you're also profitable in a tough Canadian market. So tell us, how have you been able to not get the something shiny syndrome, stay focused with your eyes on the prize, and make a profit in an area where everybody else is burning cash? What is your strategy?
I'll tell you all about it, but first of all, I have to compliment Margaret, because great operators always shine. She said, focus on customer experience. She said, focus on execution, focus on quality. These are words of the wise, and I completely agree, and kudos to you for doing everything right, Margaret. I'm a big fan of you and your products.
Oh, thank you.
I told them they're supposed to disagree, but they can't help it.
Pink Drip just launched in BC, and we brought back Congo if you're in Canada.
What just launched?
Pink Drip, which is an amazing genetic, and we should all be learning and understanding genetics in the German market and the international markets.
And so, Raj, what is your strategy?
It's a good thing I'm hanging out with Margaret tonight, so hopefully I get to try it.
I didn't bring it.
Party at Raj's house.
Why not? But I will say this, getting the basics right in any business is critical, and High Tide is no different. So I've been an operator in retail business since I was 21. I'm 44 now. I don't mind sharing that I have a lot of retail experience. And what we've done is we've really focused in and honed in on the basics. So, what are the basics of business? Get your cost controls right. Focus on free cash flow generation. Every business should be built to turn a profit, and sooner rather than later. And we saw that on day one. Everyone was going in one direction, and we were like, if everybody's selling the same thing on the same block, how are we different from anybody else? So differentiated thinking, which got us launching our innovative discount club model, which we did in October of 2021 very, very successfully, built the largest Canadian retail brand, and built the largest loyalty program in cannabis through Cabana Club and Elite. And we have over 1.8 million members of the Cabana Club today in Canada.
That's a lot of data.
Yes.
Think about that data play.
Roughly 12 to 14% of all Canadian cannabis users are part of our club. So differentiated mindset, innovative thinking, focus on cost controls, free cash flow generation, high quality real estate, the list goes on. But if you get the basics right, there's a very good chance you're going to be successful for the long term. Everything that Margaret summed up, I absolutely agree. Got to focus on the basics and got to hone in on your craft. You can't do everything that everybody else is doing. What is your value proposition? So as long as you know your value proposition, you bring it to the table, there's good chances of success that you'll be successful in the industry.
I think there's a lot of people that wear the I bootstrapped my business with a badge of pride, as they should, but it does put you a little bit vulnerable when you don't really have enough money and you're deciding, am I going to have the best real estate? Am I going to have the best app for my loyalty program? How am I
Choose
going?
what you're going to be best at.
You have to choose
Choose
that.
where you play to win.
Yeah,
right?
and understand if your job is to be customer centric, making sure the customer has a great experience.
Think like a customer all the time.
Think
right?
like a customer
if
all the
you're thinking
time.
like a customer, you're already halfway there, right?
Your mic drop moment
and
right
do not
there.
mess up on the location if you're a retailer, right? Location, 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 whether it's
Facts.
cannabis or anything else. That's one advice I can give to the audience. Get the location right if you're a retailer.
But
do
hold
not
on.
sacrifice
But
on the quality of.
How do we, let's try to tie this in more, because you guys have more experience, Margaret, Raj. How do you tie this into Europe? So my question is, we're sitting in Germany specifically today, right? So how do you tie this in? Because no one here can go open up retail locations.
Correct.
No one here can choose location. And even from a customer experience point of view, it's very different because you have a patient, you have a doctor, you probably have a telemedicine platform, and so forth. And the whole chain line is very different today.
That's a good question. We're not talking about locations yet in Germany, but we could very well be talking about locations in Germany. What we are talking about is knowing your value proposition. Again, even if we're talking about the medical market in Germany, High Tide stands in a very unique place. In Canada, we have the best and the biggest networks and relationships with partners
They
like
do,
Margaret.
absolutely, yeah.
We move over $570 million in annual cannabis, and we're bringing this value proposition to Germany. We feel that we can be the consolidator supplier in Germany, bring the Canadian house of brands, represent Canada in Germany, and that is our value proposition. What is somebody else's?
But the the Canadian brands are already signing up with Soma as an example, and other companies. So you do have a lot of
You
Canadian
guys
brands
doing a deal
already coming.
together?
We're
Or is that
not-
going to happen in the green room when we're done?
I've met George in
We
Portugal,
started-
full
There you
disclosure.
go.
Yeah.
But I don't
Jamie, you and I were in a very innovative dispensary in Munich, right,
Correct.
Germany.
Yeah, Manuel, are you here?
Right, and so
Okay.
there's this innovation happening here where rather than it being a pharmacy with a little cannabis side place,
Right.
actually the cannabis is the branded pharmacy, and the
yeah.
generic pharmacy is a little cubbyhole off to the side.
Yeah,
but
they met the requirement. They had to have a
Right,
pharmacy,
so-
right?
And
So
that's
they met it.
innovation.
This is the
Okay, wait.
innovation.
Cannabis.
Let's,
Yeah, but I wanna hear
let's
from
bring
Will
it
really
back
quick.
to Germany.
I
and
want
Europe.
yeah. Okay, well, I'll let you speak, but I have a question for you too. But I'll let you speak
Let me
first.
soliloquize for one minute. We are in a patient-centric market. That's your customer.
Patient, meaning patient, not consumer.
And this entire industry needs to focus on, at least in the international markets, the patient.
Education.
Because as much as we are advocates, activists, consumers, we know that the adult use market is years away. And the only way to get there is by having an industry that acts as a responsible counterparty, so politicians and society can understand that this is not a scary orientation for a new market. This is stable, this is trustworthy, this is efficacious, and quality will show through.
You just recently held a closed-door summit, a groundbreaking idea of bringing global leaders, politicians, scientists, doctors, all of the major stakeholders of cannabis to DC to do a policy summit. And I remember you saying to me early on, I'm like, well, what is your goal? What is your why? What do you hope to get out of it? And you said, I want everybody on a WhatsApp chat. Did that happen?
It did.
It did. Congratulations on accomplishing the goal. But I'd like to know, what were the insights that were gleaned from those days at that policy summit that investors in the crowd here could learn? Because you guys are all basically the movers and shakers behind closed doors, making things happen. What was the salient ideas that came out of that we're all going to benefit from?
So I'll start with the origin of the summit was, we've been investing since 2018, formed Artemis in 2017. So we've seen sort of the evolution of the early markets from North America, Caribbean. I followed sort of the deregulatory environment around the world. And we hold up my home country, the United States, as the contra example for how to deregulate. Because in the United States, we started with a patient-first idea, but quickly, because the industry was cash-strapped and people follow shiny objects anyway, as soon as adult use came along, the patient was left behind. Medical in the US doesn't exist. It's a tax rebate. There's no medical market, because a medical market is where the patient is actually a center point. Medical research can take place. Pharma companies will actually invest in pipeline because they will have an end market that they can recoup their investment on novel innovations and formulations. It doesn't exist in the US. We've blended rec, adult use, and medical. It doesn't exist. So when we saw CanG coming forward, and this is 2 years ago when we thought the CanG was arriving sooner.
CanG's the law that you all know.
CanG, so the move of cannabis from narcotic to non-narcotic status. We thought that, as we've seen, the rest of Europe, the rest of the international world would look over and say, wow, what Germany has, we want. And our fear was that if we watched the United States, which is really a patchwork of disparate jurisdictions that has no harmony, that if the rest of the world went the way of the US, and we had jurisdictional laws that prevented the free flow of cannabis, we'd be in a terrible place.
We just get more mess. It was a mess.
So we said the only way to do that is to get the regulators together, to get a summit that was of, by, and for the regulators, so they could lean in and share best practices. Because as Peter was saying earlier, the new ministers that come into power to regulate this industry typically have no experience in cannabis. And they usually come from a point of disinformation and fear and stigma. And so what we needed was a guideline, a framework to get ahead of what we thought the rest of the world would look like. And you're right, I said if we had nothing better coming out of the summit than a WhatsApp chat group where these world regulators were leaning in and sharing what worked, what didn't work, we'd be victorious. And what came out of that actually is something even more powerful. One is that there's incredible harmony. When we talked behind closed doors about what we wanted for the industry, again, starting with patient first, and separating out adult use from medical, and making medical the mainstay and the flagship to launch this industry, we had harmony. And when we think about how we want to translate that back, perhaps even to the US, we needed to figure out the next step. And the next step, we believe, is to have an organization that sits perhaps even in Vienna, close to the UN, and is able to talk about standardization. So we have USP, ASTM, ISO talking about quality standards, protocols. We have a regulatory body that's well informed by data, so it's evidence-derived data. It's fact-driven, not belief-driven. And we have a framework that people want to lean into and take part. And that includes industry. So it's not just regulators, it's industry and investors. It has to be a dialogue. So everyone's fingerprints are on what this industry should look like in the future.
I think that's super cool. And when I'm thinking about what's going on, like here in this panel, and then juxtaposed against what you were doing in your policy summit, I'm thinking about you are all thinking about how to take your business into the future, the money you need to get there, and Will is thinking about, because we're all building an airplane while in flight, right? All of us together. And Will's getting the fuselage ready for the rocket ship to go.
And I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm an investor. I want to stick to my lane.
Yeah, but you want to have good investments, so you're sort of laying the
I'm sitting right next to Will, right?
And
but it's a point.
Is that why I put you next to Raj?
We all have a
be.
role here. We all need to lean in. We all need to work together. So again, I'm not an event coordinator. I'm not a summit master. I leave that to Alex Rogers and the folks that actually know what they're doing.
Yep.
But when you have an unmet need, and we can see that unmet need, if everyone else is busy, we're busy too, someone needs to take the lead. And so we've seen Germany as the engine on the train for Europe and perhaps the international markets. And I think investors and operators in the room, it's incumbent upon all of us to make these strides together.
And I was at the summit, and I want to say real kudos to Will and the team. It was
Let's
incredible.
give Will a hand for putting
Yeah.
that summit together for our industry.
Look, guys,
He did that for us.
It was really an incredible moment to speak to people, and I think you asked a question, George, about what we can do. The word education is where it all starts, and that really is patient-centric. So Will talked about stigma, about regulation, about getting people together. He's right in that a lot of people come from a fear-based position. We in Canada have been medically legal for 25 years, something like that, 96, I believe. The US, people don't understand that the US was first made medically legal in San Francisco in the 90s. Yeah, around the AIDS movement and HIV. This really helps patients. To help with stigma, every person who's part of the cannabis industry is an educator. Educate yourself. Make sure your team is educated. Have them show up every day. Our sales team is not a sales team. They're business education consultants. We are there to educate, getting the right strain for the right patient, not having people green out, not having those experiences. Every time every person walks in, every time you are in a place where someone says, you're in the cannabis industry, let me speak to you, they may sit there and tell you about the fentanyl overdose of somebody that they knew. Then sit there and educate them on cannabis, and that it is very different. It's extremely important. We've had testing and work done in the opioid industry for 120 plus years, which is why there's huge development of the pharmaceutical industry. In 20, 30 years, where cannabis is going to be able to help people is incredible. The efficacy, there's so much work yet to do. Let's be excited and let's educate, and that's our job, and that's your job.
can I add just one last point? So again, bringing this back to the investment opportunities and where this industry is going. Again, not speaking as an activist or a consumer, because I want the pilot programs to move forward. I want adult use at some point in time. But we don't have to wait. We're doing ourselves a disservice by talking about adult use and when it's coming and being very focused on the future. And it's not taking anything away from patients when or taking away from the consumer or the individual advocate when we talk about patients. But we have to be real. It is a vibrant, exciting market right now for investment. It's not just Germany, it's Poland, it's France next year, it's the Nordics, it's the UK.
Slovenia.
Canada is improving after all the hardship.
Robust
There's a couple of good Canadian opportunities.
Canadians.
Here.
Couple for sure.
I think George is a good opportunity. That's Portugal.
So we have, of the 27
Thanks,
EU
Jamie.
countries, we have 21 that have legal medical programs. We have pilot programs in Switzerland. We have 23 opportunities already in jurisdictions that we want to harmonize in the international markets that are very robust. So you don't need to wait. But what you do need to do is you need to pick the right operators that have quality, that have focus, and are driving their businesses. And it comes down to folks like George that it's team first. It's the intellectual capital, the ability to pivot because we're in young markets. So for the investors in the room, you don't need to wait for anything. And when George was talking about the lack of working capital, which was a discussion yesterday, we're funding working capital with equity today. I'm buying pieces of companies so they can buy their next set of product that they can sell. It's crazy. So there's a huge debt opportunity.
And pivoting on that topic from the rah-rah, because we're all kind of rah-rah right now, but let's get back into the sober reality. And I'm going to give that to you, David. You're seeing a lot of operators that have their backs against the wall because there has been a dearth of working capital. So they're, and I'm a real estate investor. I like to buy old houses and fix them up and flip them, right? So it's the buy low, sell high, or buy something distressed, fix it up, and make it something pretty again. How do you do that where just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's good? How do you decide what's cheap and good?
Yeah, there's lots of those opportunities out there, Jamie, for sure. And obviously, some like Canada, Australia, we've seen consolidation. There's a real distressed market. US, some states as well. But in Germany, in nascent markets, in growing markets, there are operators that can't access capital. So the valuation tends to be very, very attractive for an investor. And sometimes there's an ability to actually buy the company or move into a majority position. But be very careful what you look at and what you choose. One of the things I've seen over 12 years working in the industry, I've only seen one good integration following an M&A transaction, one really good integration. Not that I've studied all of them. In the US, I'm not as up on Will. in fairness. But globally and in Canada, very rare to see a company that's bought or merged somebody else or bought a liquidation asset and merged it properly. They're on to the next one. They're not looking at 10
If they're in liquidation, there's probably a reason why they're in liquidation to begin with. And if they can't do their job right and you think you can get in and fix it, makes no sense.
Well, I can,
buyer beware, right?
I can tell you guys, we did an acquisition exactly a year ago. So we bought a distressed asset in Portugal. It was a grow that we've completely turned around in 1 year now. It's cash positive. It's we're going to break even. I mean, on the investment
That's
side,
two then.
in a year and a half. So it's two. So and we exclusively grow the cookies product out of there.
But did you integrate it, or did you clean house and make it yours?
So again, if I'm being very honest here, the reality of it is the proper way should have been to completely clean house and start over. The reality of it was when you're buying a distressed asset, you're also a bit worried about just completely like dropping the ball. So it was a bit of a slow roll that we could have done probably quicker to just bring things back in line. But we've invested probably about $1 to $2 million into the facility, and it's now running fantastic. So it's a really great product coming out of there. Quality, brand, and consistency.
Due diligence, Jamie. Due diligence.
Due diligence. I agree. Yeah.
Due diligence, I always laugh when people say due diligence because nobody does it, it seems like, or nobody did it. And now all these people have lost
There are
their
a lot
money.
of companies that do due diligence. Thank you
I have
very
to
much.
respectfully disagree.
Respectfully.
I'm still not in Germany. There are reasons why.
That's right. And that brings me to that question. I know everybody in the room wants to know what happened. You were going to invest in Germany, and you didn't.
Remain determined.
Well,
The
and I'm
determination
not
is still
asking
there.
you to spill secrets that you can't spill, but what I would like to know is something happened, and it's either, you looked at the company and said no, but that could be a reflection on internal changes you're making to the political climate we happen to live in right now, which has been wildly unpredictable. Like overnight, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. So it seemed like on the heels of that, you guys made a decision.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can't get into specifics because we have an NDA in place and we've given the reasoning why we had to walk away from that transaction. But you don't decide getting into foreign markets or a market like Germany just because everybody else is doing it. Again, we know we have a value proposition. We're getting into this market for the long term and all other ancillary European markets eventually. So we want to plot our moves carefully, and even if that means that it takes double the amount of time that I've already spent looking for the right partner, looking for the right asset, well, that's exactly what we're going to do. Because once you find your dance partner and you have your value proposition figured out, there should be smooth sailing going forward, and it's never smooth sailing in cannabis. So, I don't regret the time we wasted. I've learned a lot through that experience. And sometimes the universe knows what's best, and we may be on to a much bigger, better opportunity. To be disclosed soon.
I always say in real estate, it's cheaper to have a house sit vacant than to put the wrong tenant in it, because that costs a lot of money to get them out. Same idea. I want to keep my promise. I know we could sit here probably for another 2 days and just pontificate. I'd like to know if anyone out there in the audience, lots of questions. We've got microphones that are standing in the aisle. You guys can get in line.
We also have Michael Knote. Let's hear it for Michael Knote.
Michael Knote from
Running around.
Weedmaps, long time journalist, activist journalist, kind of a rock star in Germany. Handing out the mic.
Thank you.
Hi, Hirsch.
You guys passed that microphone around like
That's
it was
Hirsch
a joint.
Jane.
Hey, everyone.
Hirsch.
Good to see you.
He's amazing.
A big theme of this conversation was how important it is for operators to understand and adhere to their value propositions. And yet another big theme was how distinct these global regulatory regimes are, right? I think George said that these regulations are constantly in flux. Will, you kind of noted that Germany will be medical for the foreseeable future. So how do you navigate the pressure from investors to become a global player without sacrificing that value proposition, which was born out of your experience in just one country and may not translate to a different regulatory regime?
That was a good question.
Great
Who wants
question.
to take that?
I'll start, and
Okay,
then I'm
George.
sure Will can continue. From our point of view, transparency, I think, is the key thing with our investors. So we don't try to promise on anything, and we try to be as realistic as we can in our predictions. And even if the numbers don't come out what we think our investors want to see, we will show exactly what the reality is. And if I beat that forecast, that's a good check mark for me. And if I come, somewhere close to it, that's still a great check mark for me. So for us, personally, we have a very small pool of investors, and we just try to be as transparent as we can about everything that's happening in the market and all the new innovations like France coming online. Great example. Everybody is hyped up about it, but let's be realistic. We'll see what happens. So,
if I could just, if I could just go next after George to answer Hirsch's questions. You got to really be able to hone in on your craft in your home country first. You can dance all around the universe and get nowhere, versus, become somebody, become a dominant force in your home turf. Once you've done it, you have the model to cut, copy, paste for the most part. And if you're going to crumble against under investor pressure just because you're making unforeseen promises and, things that are not realized today, of course, that can get into some very tricky situations. I would advise the audience that always hone in on what's your strength in your native market, in your domestic market, before thinking about expansion. High Tide's done that for 6 years. We're still only in Canada and just a little bit through our ancillary businesses in the United States. Now we see a clear path ahead in Germany. We see a clear path ahead in Europe, where we sit in a very pretty part of that value chain where we can balance the supply-demand dynamics in Germany and Europe. So now we're going to enter Germany, but we took our time taking that decision and not rushing and continuing to march forward in Canada.
And I think investors are gonna
I
appreciate
promise I'm
that
not picking on you, Raj, on purpose. I'm trying a little bit. But if I was, just to your point, if I was only reliant on, on my domestic market, on my domestic market in Portugal, I would get nowhere.
No.
Different situation.
The basic answer is I sit on the board of Clever Leaves, and we're an export-only business because there's no really domestic market in Colombia. So just stick to your knitting. I mean, be an expert in your unique selling proposition and what your competitive advantage is. If you're able to transport that to other markets, we as investors want you to grow, either grow in your own vertical or go horizontal or go both if you can, but don't overextend. It's kind of, know thyself. So if you know yourself, you know your strengths, you know where you can go, be an expert in the area that you're going into, and even in new markets, you can be an expert pretty quickly, and realize you're going to have to pivot. So that transparency and trust is allowing us to let the leash out. I think being vulnerable as managers and owners, like what scares you, what's not going well, is just as important as what's going well. In fact, maybe more so. And if you're able to do that, I feel a lot more trust. I can extend with you, and we can all take risks together. But it starts with being an expert in your core, and then adding on only with the resources that you actually have. Don't overextend.
Give it up for this amazing panel.
Yes.
Good job.
Let's hear it for Jamie Pearson. Okay.